Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this Labor Day 2015. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can listen to my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. if you so choose on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Now, I very rarely do radio shows on holidays. I do not like holidays. I don't really celebrate any of them. I don't even celebrate, the holidays, the personal holidays, like the day I first cut my toenails when I was a youth, and my mother was teaching me how to do that. The day I learned how to go to the bathroom myself was a good day. That was September 24th. I think that was 1954. And there's other really personal holidays I hold really dear. Like the first time I got a job. That's a good holiday. And became a card-carrying member of the Slave Club of America. That was somewhere in 1966 or something, when my first job was delivering prescriptions, to elderly people in my car. I don't know what minimum wage back then was, $1.35 an hour. But we lived better back then. Oh, yeah. At least the food was good. At least the air was cleaner. At least we didn't have one Bush in office yet. Oh, it was coming, but we didn't have one of those guys in yet. So the world was a bit better then. But my first job, and I'm doing that, it is Labor Day. We might as well reminisce about our jobs. And I was doing this after school, and it wasn't during football or baseball season. So it was kind of a short-lived job, because that's what I usually did after school during those days. But I decided to test the waters of the American workforce. So I got a job in a drugstore, and I was a pretty good-looking kid back then. People would hire me. They'd look at you. You know how people look at you and they know if you're good-looking or ugly, or if you had a bad hair day, or if you've, been out the night before. You know what I mean. It's the first impressions. So when I walked in, I looked pretty good. You can handle the job. So I came to work. I remember it was 3:30 in the afternoon after school, and the pharmacist who owned the drugstore, and thank God they were still owned by private companies. It wasn't Walgreens or CVC or Big Pharma. Back then, it was Joe's Drugstore, right next to Pete's Liquor Store, right next to John's Grocery Store, and right next to the Fruit Guy and all that kind of stuff. That was really fun. People really back then actually did like working for themselves and making a living at it. And the barber down the street, he owned his own barbershop, right? Yep, it was called Pete's Barbershop. And if you went about two stores over, there was Giuseppe's Pizzeria. I used to go, his, son, Joe, we went to school together. And after school, we go over and get the best piece of pizza you'd ever want. But his dad owned it. It wasn't Domino's. It wasn't Papa John's. He didn't do any advertising over the tube. In fact, that's a waste of money as far as I'm concerned. Why would you want to give money to a TV station that does nothing but lie to the people about and give you crappy radio and TV shows? Why do you want to do that? So, Giuseppe, Joe's dad, and I still remember him. We had every day after school, sometimes we'd go there and sit in that booth. He'd have a couple pieces of pizza, and, people would come in and have a slice, and the pizzas were good, the food tasted a little better back then. So there were all these stores run by people, owned by people, who really put pride into their work. So anyway, I'll get back to that. But when you think about it, that first job I had, so I show up to the pharmacy, and he gives me all of these little packets, This goes to, it's an important job. You don't want to screw it up. You don't want to give Elsa, Cheryl's heart medication, so you got to keep that in order. I knew, he tried to impress that upon me, that it's very important that you give the right drug to the right person, because these elderly people, they might not even read the label. They're trusting you. So I made sure that Elsie got her pills, Jack got his, and I had it all laid out on my front seat. And back then, we didn't have to wear seatbelts. No. There were no seatbelt laws. There were no fancy things, GPS systems in the car that would tell me where to go. There was nothing like that. I had to figure out by my own self. I had a little map, but I knew that area pretty well. That I had to go to this street, that street, and I had to figure out the fastest way to do it. And the reason I had to figure out the fastest way to do it was because I did really want to get the medication to these people. So anyway, once the pharmacist, who liked me and I liked him, impressed upon me the importance of getting the medication to the right people and not screwing it up, and making sure, because a lot of these elderly people, he said, they won't even read the label. They'll just open it and take the pill. They may know if the pill doesn't look or feel like the same pill, but you can't trust that either. So he said, don't give them the wrong pills. I'm going, oh my God, can you imagine this? I give somebody the wrong pill and she ends up having an earthquake heart attack. Oh my God, this is an important job. So anyway, I get off school and I notice, and back then we didn't have the Weather Channel, didn't have really anybody telling you anything about the weather. It was either you look outside and you go, it's cold. I think it's sunny today. I think a storm's coming in. Well, I remember it was about 2 o'clock when we're sitting in school and the snow started to fall. And then, and by the way, this was right after football season. If we were over with, and then this was a big, huge storm. If you look back in history books, in Chicago was the biggest storm. So anyway, the snow started to come down, and I didn't have chains in my car. Nothing. Well, anyway, by the time I got to the drugstore, it was snowing pretty darn hard. And the pharmacist said, you think you can make, he didn't know either. I just went out. Well, about halfway through my route, there was so much snow on the ground in these 4 hours or so that I couldn't even drive the car anymore. And it snowed, and it snowed, and it snowed, and it snowed. And you know what I did? I didn't have a cell phone. No cell phone. And I'm not really that far away. I'm not out in the rural Montana. I'm in Chicago. But I knew that the route, I had maybe a 7-8 block radius, and I maybe a 4-mile distance. And with a car, I could have been done by 5. And gone home, had dinner. But I remember the car wouldn't go any farther. There was about 3 feet of snow on the ground by now. And in Chicago, we'd drive with a foot of snow, 2 feet of snow. Yeah, no big deal. But this was the huge storm. I'll never forget it. And I couldn't go any further. My car stalled. I left it there, and I got all these packages of medication. I didn't have we didn't carry backpacks back then like these kids do now. You think they're going to, work in the mines. You see these kids. We used to actually just carry our books under our arm. And I kind of like that. It makes you look smart, doesn't it? It really did. I mean, I'd walk, and what do kids do these days? I remember the first time I went out with a girl, I one of the things I had to work up, can I carry your books home? Oh, isn't that romantic? And she would say yes, and then you knew she liked you. So you got your books in the right hand, her books in the left hand, and you're walking home. And you know the nice thing about that? You're not going to get into trouble. You got no hands to get into trouble with. But nowadays, these kids, they carry back. What are you going to do? Say, Sally, can I carry your backpack home? You know, there's no romance in that. Can't even see the book she has. Who knows what's in there? You know? Who knows what the hell she's got in that backpack? I'm not going to carry your backpack. You know? Might as well just forget about it. I'm leaving. But anyway, so I didn't even make... I think I made my first delivery, and I had like 6 to go. 6 or 7 stops. And I said to myself, my God, maybe these people will die if I don't get there. What am I going to do? And I'm too far away to go back. I don't have a cell phone. I have nothing. So you know what I did? I walked. In the snow, it was cold as heck, and I walked to every door and gave them their medication. And then I went home, and by that time, my dad was wondering what happened. You know, he was worried, and I told him, and, you know, the night ended. Well, after the snowstorm lit up, and that was 3 days later, so nobody did anything. I had to go dig the car out. I went back to the drugstore. And I figured I was going to get fired. I really did. I figured I was going to get fired because my car broke down. And my dad, in the meantime, had called the druggist and said that I had delivered each one of those packages, on foot, and they got their medication. And I came back 3 days later. And guess what? He was so happy with me. He said, Greg, you got a job for life anytime you want. And I said, well, I only can stay until, till baseball season starts. And that was the beginning of my first job. And he gave me a bonus for walking those medications to people. Now, the moral of the story is, I don't think I'd have done that for Walgreens. I didn't really do it, I don't know if I would have. Because back then, things were a little more personable. I knew the druggist. I knew these people mattered. But today, would people think that way? They don't think you matter. You're just a number. You're just one of Walgreens' customers, and if I can't get there, tough luck. You can die, buddy. And I'm telling you, that's the feeling I get when I walk out into the workforce today. And the reason is I think we got a lot of pissed off people. I really do. I don't think people are happy working in America the way it's set up now. I think people would have been a lot happier, it's just me, if they made a little less money, but had a little bit more pride in what they did. And I mean, maybe they own a business. I think more people ought to own their own businesses, and we ought to get rid of all these big corporations and all this crap that makes things so easy but so sterile. Because we've lost our identity as a people. And there is no friendship anymore. Nobody knows people anymore unless, I went back to my hometown and it changed so much. Chicago's changed. I guess people wouldn't know it because, okay, how's a kid 20 years old going to know it changed? But when I grew up, Wrigley Field was still Wrigley Field. They didn't have these big signs in the... And now they're doing exactly what everybody else does, and it's nothing more. And, I'll be really sad when we win the World Series. And you got to understand why. Because it isn't really the key reason that baseball is played. Doesn't matter whether you win the World Series or you haven't won it since 1908. They're still there. And everybody's waiting to win that big game. What if you never win it? I'd be perfectly happy if the Cubs never won a World Series ever again in the history of this world. Because all of the memories I had as a kid going to that ballpark were good ones. 30 cents to get in, and my God, the ushers would still let the kids go down and sit right down by the boxes, right by the ball players, even though rich people, were in this ballpark too. The kids were the most important part. Now, oh yeah, you're going to see them giving away things, ball players giving away, but it isn't personable anymore. How can you be personable with a guy? You know why these kids like these ball players? Because they make millions of dollars. When I went to the ballpark, the guy playing third base probably didn't make much more than my dad. And my dad owned, at that time, a trucking company. Small trucking company. And he probably didn't make much more than that ball player. So there was kind of a feeling that they were just like us. But they just like baseball. Now it's a whole different ballgame. And I think you know what I'm talking about. But getting back to this Labor Day, that was my first job. And probably my best job. Because since then, I could go through the next hour. I could go through probably a year telling you about all of the jobs that I had in my life. And I'll tell you what, I could write a book about it. Because I turned out to be nothing more than a writer that couldn't do anything. So I tried everything. And failed at most. But one of the nice things I learned along the way was that working to me never really meant much about money. It meant doing something that was important. And it seems like the more you think like that, the less money you make. And I always ask myself the question on this Labor Day, why do the people that do the most damage in the world make the most money? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Why do CEOs that do absolutely no good for humanity make the most money? Why does a guy like the Pope, who sits up there telling us he's Jesus Christ and God, which is a complete lie, make more money than most every human being on the planet? And what do you mean by money? The guy sits on gold. That whole organization's worth billions. Why does the people you ever notice Congress? Every one of them are millionaires. You ever notice who's running for president these days? Millionaires. I mean, I thought, and did you ever realize that if that equates to justice, then you have to understand that the people that make the most money do the most damage, and that's why they're in office. So the point is, what is Labor Day to Americans today? I think we have a bunch of unhappy people working in unhappy jobs. Nobody talks to each other. Nobody knows. How much, in the last 40 years, every year in this country gets worse and worse. There's always going to be some kind of big, huge, the dollar's going to fall. Hey, look, you can't the medium house in certain places is so absurd. For example, the median price of a house in San Diego County is $500,000. Now, you can go to Tripp, South Dakota and pick up a house for $10,000. And I'm telling you, I know it because I bought one there for $16,000, which was much nicer than the house I live in now. I don't even live in a house, to tell you the truth. Now, what am I going to do in Tripp, South Dakota? So, I'm telling you, what needs to be done is there's just an absurd idea that working is going to be equal to what you get in this country. You can't start a small business anymore here unless you do some crazy thing like sit on your butt and look at a computer and create all these stupid programs. I mean, what about the guy that wants to open up a pizza shop? What about the guy that wants to, there are people that just want a small little business. They don't want to have a big, huge Home Depot. Maybe they just want a little lumber store. Nothing's going to happen like that anymore because that's not the way we are. And that's why Labor Day to me is nothing more than slave Labor Day camp. Day off. What else can it be? And let me tell you why I say that. Let's look at what most people do. The governments have created corporations to be tax collectors. That's why the tax laws are written to give them all the loopholes so they don't pay any taxes. Now, the guys at the top, they ain't doing anything. All they're doing is sitting up there controlling all this stuff, working with the government officials to make sure that all their little slave labor people go to work at Walmart, go to work at all these little stores for minimum wage and ain't going to, unless you live in Tripp, South Dakota, and there ain't no Walmart there. How the hell are you going to live on that kind of wage when the rents, you go downtown in most of these cities are, $2,000 a month? Things are out of whack. So what happens on this slave labor day? Here's exactly what happens. Corporations become tax collectors. That's why the government gives them tax loopholes and they don't pay anything because they force you to file your income tax prior to the year's deadline, which means they're taking out that money, giving it to the government, and you're not getting any of it. Now, if everybody knew the truth, this whole system would collapse. But I've talked about it years ago. I've watched people go to jail for this. I've watched somebody get killed for this. An attorney I know from South Carolina. The fact is, income taxes are illegal. Exactly what they are voluntary taxes. It's a voluntary tax to this day. And if you don't believe me, do some legal research. I spent a year when I was in law school researching this subject and found that there's never been a Supreme Court decision ever justifying the income tax. And so to get around it, back when the tax became, my grandfather, he never heard of an income tax, and they were vehement against paying anything to the government. Why should you give them anything in that form? What I mean is your labor. It's a slave concept. And I'll explain why in the next half hour, if you're interested. And while we're having fun on this slave Labor Day, why don't we ask ourselves the question, who's that third-party collector in the mafia? Didn't they used to go around and just, strong-arm people for money? Sounds pretty familiar. I think that's what your government does, but people like it. There's other ways to pay, Caesar, if that's what you believe, and I'll get into that in a minute. But we'll be back on the Investigative Journal on this Slave Labor Day. Back in 3 minutes.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Okay, we're back on this slave Labor Day here in America. And before I get into why the tax system in this country, the income tax, is illegal and why you shouldn't be paying it and how they BS you into doing it, I wanted to mention that in the beginning of the show I talked about my first job. Now, as the years have gone by, I'm going to leave out all the jobs I had in between. I'm going to talk to you about the last job that I'll ever have in my life. And it isn't going to be announcing a baseball game or doing any of those things, so just stick with me on this slave Labor Day. Now, most of us don't really get it when it comes to this issue. And I talked to attorneys, they don't want to deal with it. I was in law school, not talking to all these professors, they don't want to deal with it because everybody is playing the game. The Supreme Court played the game. When it comes to the income tax, when it first came into in existence in the 30s, even Republican senators were against it. Not to mention people who came here working their butt off. You know, why give the government a portion of your labor? You can do it you can tax people in many other ways and still support your country. That's the point I'm trying to make. I'm not saying don't pay anything. If you believe in your country, and if you're going to use roads, if you're going to use certain things, you ought to be able to contribute, but not with your labor. That's the distinction. But when you live with a corrupt organization, when you're dealing with a corrupt spiritual organization that controls this country like the Vatican and a corrupt system that comes out of Washington, D.C., which isn't even a part of your own country. It's a corporation set up with different laws and different rules. And you don't even know that. President isn't the president of you. He's the president of the corporation. Now, like I said, corporations are the thing of the right now. That's the best thing. Get into Microsoft. Get into microwave. That's what you should get into. Get into the microwave and let them cook you. Microsoft. Get into Google. Whatever these corporations. Everything is a big corporation. And you ever notice these people that get into business now? They start everybody that wants to get into business is thinking, I think I've got to franchise this. Hell, I'm going to start, I'm going to franchise, and, anything I ever do is going to be franchised. Going to have this company, that company. We're not just one company. We're going to be 1 million companies, over 1 million. We're going to make $1 million, and hell with the people. Oh, we don't care. We're going to franchise. So, that's the world we live in. And then we got all these people that are working for all of these CEOs, these fat cats. We got all these priests working for the fat cat pope. They get a pretty good living. If I had to do it all over again, I'd be a priest. Pretty nice. Hey, the bells of St. Mary. You got it made. Give you cars, give you money, give you food. All you got to do is lie. That's all. And when you realize the truth, you don't read the Bible if you're in that organization. You just, be like Father Marcinkus, who ran the Vatican Bank, who came from my city of Chicago. I met him when I was in Rome. I did meet him. He said this, we can't run a church on Hail Marys. Oh, well. But the point I'm trying to make is this income tax. So on the Slave Labor Day, it's a good issue. Why is it illegal? Why don't you have to pay it? Why do you think you have to pay it? The reason is the Supreme Court had never been able to come up with a fancy argument that could ever get by constitutional muster to legalize it. Because it's pretty simple. Let's boil this down. Taxes are only constitutional if they're direct. Just remember that word, direct tax. A direct tax means that everybody, for example, you live in a community and you want to build a road or you want to build a school. Everybody in that community is going to be taxed direct and equal. So, if I'm got a house that's worth $30,000 and the guy next to me has got this and got that, everybody in that community is directly going to be taxed at an equal amount to build that. It's a fair, direct, equal tax. People shall not be taxed by the color of their skin, shall not be taxed about the amount of money they make. They shall not be taxed. It has to be direct. Well, figure this out. How can the income tax ever be direct? It can't. It's an indirect tax. Indirect taxes are unconstitutional. So, the Supreme Court, with their great minds, and you know what? How any country wants to be ruled by guys that wear black robes, I don't know. But since they have taken the advice from the Jesuits who wore black robes, maybe that's the way it goes. But anyway, income tax is indirect because everybody's taxed unequally. Nobody's taxed direct. It's not an equal tax. There's no way they can get around it. It's unconstitutional on its face, let alone all the moral issues that come up with, what right has any country taking away your labor, your own ability? It doesn't. We can figure out how to handle our government expenses if we didn't have wars and all these things that, usurp all the money of the people. If you would not believe the money that these institutions in government and the Vatican take from you every year, it's incredible what they own. There's no hope here. And that was their idea in the 30s. After they came up with their Federal Reserve System, which is basically an illegal system of monetary value, they had to figure out how to get that monetary value out of your hands, so they figure out, we're going to tax the people for their labor. Another way to screw you. And I'll tell you what, that's the big screw job they did on you. And that's why today is nothing more than slave labor camp day. And I'm telling you, it's a day off to worship all of the people that have stuck it right up your butt. And you don't even care. Because here's the deal. Supreme Court has never, ever been able to justify that. There's no argument around it. Oh, they hate that Constitution that did that. They hate that. God, if we could just change it. Well, they had to sit there probably back then, and I can imagine the discussions back then on how to get around this. Well, what they did is said, why don't we be really smart here? Let's not try to get around it. Let's make it voluntary, but, people will catch on. We'll make them believe it's a tax they have to pay. And back then, if you look at the income tax form, it was pretty bold and bold print on the top, voluntary tax. Which means you can pay it or you don't have to pay it. Now, in that case, okay, if they put the ball in your court, and back then, not many people paid. They said, hey, if I don't have to pay it, I'm not paying it. So they had to figure out as the years went on, and the corporations got bigger, and the government got a little more conniving and a little bit more smart in how to control their slaves. That big print on the top of those IRS forms got smaller and smaller. Then they said, well, why don't we just make somebody collect it for them? We don't want people to really know. And then we'll just spread this idea that there's only two things in life that are important, that are for sure. Taxes and death. You got to pay income tax or death. And then they create the Jesuit idea of the Knights Templars, which is the IRS, which is a tax collecting body they're collecting illegal money. Well, it's really not illegal, because once you voluntarily say you're going to pay it, then they can go after you. So what do? What's the real law? The law is every year you have a choice. You can pay it or you don't pay it. Now, most people are too frightened to do that because they think they're going to go to jail. And if you understand that many of them, they do a study every year, I think it's at Princeton, about non-filers. They don't go after many people. Oh, they make an example here and there of a rich guy who wants to make a point, and then they shut him up. And then he pays $50,000 on $100. He pays he owes $10 million in taxes, and he pays them. They settle for $1 million, and they make their point. See, he didn't want to file, blah blah blah. But the fact is, it's your right not to file, And if you make an issue out of it, if you want to start a school about it, you want to teach people about it, oh, they're going to come down on you hard. And I know that for a fact because they came down hard on a friend of mine who was a lawyer in South Carolina, and he told me the inside story. He's not with us any longer. And you can go back to my old articles. But the point I'm trying to make is, as the years went on, that print of voluntary got smaller and smaller, and the more you heard was, once the IRS, once these tech dogs come, they're going to ruin you. And they have ruined people. They will ruin you, and they're doing it. Once you sign on that dotted line in that IRS form, I'm paying this year, that opens you up to, and if they don't like you, you're saying something against the government, they can screw you over. They can take those forms and change them. They can steal them like they did with the Alamo ministry. And not even, they can come in, disrupt your business, steal your forms, and then say you violated the taxes. You're not paying enough. So the point I'm trying to make is there's a fine line between paying and not. Now, every year you have the right to pay or not pay. Now, if you choose to pay and you want to do that, that's up to you. You can do that. If you believe America is the country you want to be a part of, if you like the way things are going, you like the war, you want to be involved in the Vatican-led New World Order, hey, go pay. But that's your right not to pay as well. And the point is, they do a study on this, and they keep the levels of non-filers at a certain level. Now, if everybody in this country figured this out and didn't file, they would have a big problem, because they're used to a certain amount of money coming in that they can waste, they can use to buy arms, to foment terrorism like they do with ISIS. They need this money to create more evil, and you're helping them do that. So every year, make up your own mind. Now, you're not going to believe a word I say because it's not coming from the Vatican or the government. Just do the research yourself. And I'm not even saying do that, because I'm telling you this. You research it yourself. Do you think paying income tax is fair when the Constitution of this country says it isn't, and even the Supreme Court? And all they're trying to do is bilk you for as much money as they can. That's what these corporations are all about. And the more corporations there are, the more money they're going to collect from the slave workers. And the less people are going to have their own businesses, their own land, their own homes, and their own life. And pretty soon, those vestiges that we saw even back in the 50s and 60s when I grew up aren't even going to be here anymore. That job, that little pharmacist that I worked for in the beginning, he ain't going to be here anymore. And you're going to have to go to work for Walgreens. You know, he never asked me to fill out any tax forms, if I remember. He just paid me a certain amount of money. I guess back then, the IRS hound dogs weren't as sophisticated as they are now. Now you go into a Walgreens and you tell them, you try to do this. Listen, I'll take my own taxes out. I want to work as a 1099. Hey, you don't even get a job. They'll just tell you to walk. Now, when I was working with a lawyer, I could talk to them and tell them, listen, I just want to be, I could go into a law firm that was still private, say, listen, I want to be a 1099, don't take on, and that would be fine. They'd understand. And I can do what I choose that year. And the money I made was mine. And not even to get into the moral issues of respecting the work. That's why people don't respect the work they do now, because they're giving half away to a government they don't really like, but have to put up with. They're giving it to a system that they know is corrupt. And so they become corrupted. They don't really care about you and the service they do. They're just there to pick up a few bucks to survive. And that's exactly what the owners of this world and this country want you to do. And on this day of slave labor, it's time you think about it. Because how many of you in your mind really are looking forward to getting up tomorrow and going to work? I bet you it's a very small amount of people. Now, I'm looking forward to it. And you probably ask why. Well, it ain't because of the money I'm making tomorrow. Maybe it's the money I'm losing tomorrow. But it's actually maybe the last job I'll ever have. And that is doing what I started to want to do when I got out of college. And that is to get to the truth and tell you people about it, because that's what I wanted to do, be a journalist. And along the way, oh boy, is it a difficult road? You ain't going to make much money. But I'll tell you what, you will learn a lot. And I've learned one thing. And along the way, this last job I have is probably more rewarding than anything I ever have done. Because I know in my heart I haven't sold out yet. I'm always wondering if that day's going to come, but I haven't sold out. I haven't traded in the truth for some half-wit version the Vatican or the government gives you. And does that make me any better than the guy going to work that hates his job tomorrow? Hell no. But it does do one thing. Gives me a little pride in that I'm going to leave this planet. And I don't even think it's a planet anymore, and that's a whole story in itself. I think it's just a sphere. It's just like a circle. And it's a flat little place we've been put. You might think I'm crazy, but do some research on it. And the point I'm trying to get is, well, how are you going to do that? You got to sell out. Everybody sells out a little bit in life. Oh, if I ever get a little short on money, I run over to maybe do a short little comedy skit. Hopefully somebody sees it, and then I get hired to do something, and I don't really compromise, because I tell them the same thing at when I get up there. I tell them this: boy, have you been screwed, and you don't even know it. So let me tell you. Let me start with what I was talking about today. That is, every penny that you put in your pocket is yours. Don't let this government take a penny. Don't let the Vatican take any money from you. They're not worth it. They got enough they've stolen from. And you know what? And they want it all. They're not going to be satisfied with just a portion of your income. Pretty soon you're going to be working for nothing. They won't have to pay you a darn thing. And they're looking into that as we speak. When they can cut out a person, they'll cut them out. They don't care about you. They never cared about you, and now you're starting to get it. Try to start a small business. Unless you're one of these computer geeks, and they got everybody doing that garbage now. I mean, how many kids today? I mean, it's just an insane world when you look at it. Everybody wants to be a computer genius, get into Hollywood, or become an athlete. Well, I'm sorry. It ain't going to happen. Now, you want to be a doctor, lawyer? Oh, that's a good profession, but you're going to have to sell out there too. What other professions are there in this world that you don't sell out? You know, that's what we should end the show on today. And that's figuring out what professions you can go into today where you don't have to sell out to the New World Order. Is there one? Okay, let's start with journalism. Hell no, not if you want, who's going to survive like I do? I wouldn't want anybody to live like I do. Journalism isn't going to get you anything. You're going to have to sell out to the New World Order and tell lies. Okay, what about doctors? Oh, you're going to have to believe in chemotherapy. Forget about all the natural cures, or forget about this. We're going to play this cancer game, you know. Oh boy, collect money, and we create the problem, we create the cancer, we'll create the fake cure, and then we'll kill people along the way. That's what you're going to deal with when you're a doctor. What about a lawyer? Oh yeah. I told you a long time ago, the most endangered species in the world is an honest judge. Most lawyers are alcoholics, drunks, or they're just basically so fed up with paperwork that you ever see them at night, they're pulling their hair out. Can't stand it. What about acting? What about Hollywood? Yeah, you're going to get a long way there telling the truth. What about being a preacher? Well, that's a difficult road. Look at all the preachers out there that are on TV that are really working for the Vatican, giving you all these satanic symbols. I've known a couple that have made it. But I knew one who's told the truth his life. He's spending 175 years in jail now. And you know who that is. That's one of the most disheartening, heartbreaking stories I've ever told. What about you want to start a barbershop? Well, hell, I recommend you go to Italy. You'll have a better job there. Otherwise, you got to work for, sport cuts, super cuts, all that crap cuts. That's about what you're going to get at. There aren't many professions in this world anymore that you can actually wake up and say you're not working for the man. And that's why this Slave Labor Day is a day that we should all remember. Because tomorrow we're all going to wake up and we're going to get it put right, where again. And we're going to do that for another year. Then there's going to be another day. And it ain't going to get any better. It ain't going to get, and everybody's going to, I wish I was a CEO. Hey, listen, let me tell you a little story. You and me are not in their club, and we're never going to be in their club. And so we ought to just remember that the owners of this country, the real owners, the Vatican, the Jesuits, all of these guys the politicians, they're just the puppets. But all these guys behind the scenes have one thing in mind. That is to cull this population down, to figure out ways to kill you, and to keep baseball going. We got to have a few guys that are healthy and out there making millions of dollars just to keep the people a little bit pacified. And that's about what it is. You go to work, then they put a pacifier in your mouth when you come home, and you're nothing but a big baby. Sitting there in front of the tube before you have to go again the next day. And the next day. And the next day. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll be a computer geek and you won't have to do that. Well, anyway, happy Slave Labor Day.